I never pictured my life falling apart in broad daylight. But here I am, standing in my own driveway watching shirts, jeans, and even my work jackets explode out of our second-story window like some insane laundry grenade. And the craziest part? My brain still can't process how everything went to hell this fast. Diana, my wife, is hanging out the window, face crimson, eyes wild, screaming at me to get out of her house like I'm some intruder who broke in. I've known her anger, but never this. Never the kind of rage that shakes a person from the inside out. What makes it worse? Just this morning we were sitting at the kitchen counter sipping coffee, talking about weekend plans. Nothing strange. Nothing tense. Not even a hint that she was about to detonate our entire life. And then there's Luke, her 17-year-old son. He's standing right behind her, a hand resting on her shoulder like he's trying to calm her down. Anyone else would think he's being supportive, the good kid stepping in during a meltdown. But when his eyes meet mine for half a second, something feels wrong. Because in that tiny moment, I swear I see it, the smallest curl at the edge of his mouth. Not worry. Not confusion. A smirk. Like he knows something I don't. Like he's enjoying this. Stay with me till the end, because what I found out next didn't just explain the meltdown, it exposed the truth behind the smirk, the screaming, and the reason my life was thrown out the window piece by piece. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to Dark Infidelity Stories, where every tale reveals the secrets people never thought would come to light. Let me rewind, because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. I met Diana 4 years ago in the cafe where she was a manager. She was this warm, graceful widow who'd lost her husband to cancer 3 years earlier. Luke was only 13 then, quiet, withdrawn, still struggling without his father. Before we go further, make sure to hit subscribe and like the video if you enjoy these real-life stories. Anyway, I fell for Diana quickly. 8 months in, I proposed, she cried, said yes, and I promised both her and Luke that I'd never try to replace his dad, just support them however I could. The first couple of years were honestly beautiful. Luke kept his distance from me, but that was fine. I didn't push. I never asked him to call me dad. I helped with homework when he asked, drove him places, covered his phone bill, bought his clothes, even upgraded us to a bigger home so he could have his own space. Diana was happy. I thought Luke was adjusting. I really believed we were becoming a family. But now, looking back, I can see the exact moment things began to sour, when the poison started slipping in. About 8 or 9 months ago, Luke started making these little comments to Diana. Things I'd overhear when I walked into the room. Sweet on the surface, but with a strange undertone. He'd tell her she was gorgeous, that men stared at her everywhere she went, that she deserved a man who treated her like royalty. I brushed it off as a teenage boy complimenting his mom. But then whenever Diana and I tried setting boundaries, normal boundaries, he'd pull out the dad would've let me card. At first Diana shut him down, told him to stop, reminded him that I treated both of them well. But his comments didn't stop. They became constant, subtle, strategic, like water slowly carving a canyon. He started questioning why they had to follow my rules in their house. I tried talking to Diana about it, gently suggesting that maybe Luke was struggling more than we realized, but she brushed it off as typical teenage rebellion. But I noticed the way she started looking at me differently, almost like she was watching, evaluating, waiting for something. Then about 4 months ago, things took a darker turn. Luke became 2 different people. When Diana was around, he'd joke with me, laugh, act like we were cool. But the moment she left the room, his expression would go blank. Cold. Like I wasn't even worth acknowledging. I'd try talking to him, ask if he wanted to do something together, and he'd answer with one-word responses, monotone and empty. Diana would walk back in and suddenly he'd switch back to cheerful again. It made me question my own sanity. The real blow-up started 3 months ago when Luke asked for a car. Not just any car, he wanted a $35,000 BMW because some friend had one. I sat him down and explained that it was an absurd amount for a first car, but I'd help him get a reliable used one and he could work part-time to cover insurance. He looked at me like I had just insulted his entire existence, stormed off crying loudly enough for Diana to hear every second of it. That night Diana was distant, cold. She asked why I had to deny him, why I couldn't be more understanding after everything he'd been through. She wondered if, just this once, I could give him something big. I was stunned. It was a $35,000 request from a teenager. But she just turned away and said I couldn't understand a mother's heart. From that moment on, everything changed. Luke started whispering privately with her whenever I entered a room. Diana began questioning me out of nowhere. Did I really like Luke? Why did he feel uncomfortable around me? Why did he think I acted differently when she wasn't home? Every time I defended myself, she'd ask, "So you're saying my son is lying?" I realized he was playing this perfectly, presenting vague accusations that were impossible to disprove, building a narrative that I was some two-faced monster behind closed doors. Then, 2 weeks ago, it all exploded. I came home from work and Diana grabbed my arm, trembling, saying we needed to talk about what happened with Luke. I had no idea what she meant. She pulled up Luke's sleeve, and there was a bruise. Her eyes filled with tears as she told me Luke said I grabbed him, that I'd been getting aggressive when she wasn't home. My world flipped upside down. Panic surged through me because I have never, not once, laid a hand on that boy. I started shouting, not in anger but in pure desperation, and she stepped away from me like I might snap. She said she didn't want to believe Luke, that she had ignored so many things because she thought he was just acting dramatic. But the stories he'd told her were too detailed, too consistent. I grabbed her hands and begged her to think back on our 4 years together, if she had ever once seen me be violent. She stepped back from me like touching my hands had burned her. And when she whispered that this was exactly what terrified her, that Luke insisted I acted like 2 different men, it felt like the ground slid out from underneath me. That's when I noticed him. Luke was standing halfway down the staircase, silent, motionless, watching us. And for a split second, his face wasn't scared, hurt, or upset. It was blank, cold, almost curious, like he was observing a lab experiment to see what reaction he'd created. But the moment he realized I'd spotted him, his entire expression snapped into something else. Wide eyes, trembling lip, pure fear. The transformation was instant, like flipping a switch. Then he sprinted down the steps yelling for his mother, voice trembling perfectly, practically begging her not to let me hurt her. That little performance, that flawless act, shattered whatever stability Diana had left. Her decision was immediate. She told me I needed to pack a bag. Not in an hour. Not after talking. No. My mind was spinning so violently I could hardly breathe. I shoved clothes into a duffel with shaking hands, feeling the life I'd built crumble in real time. When I stepped outside to load my car, I made the mistake of looking back up at the house. There they were, in the upstairs window. Luke stood behind his mother with an arm wrapped around her shoulders, comforting her like he was the only stable thing left in her world. It was a perfect picture, the devoted son and the heartbroken mother leaning on him. But then he shifted slightly, thinking I couldn't see his face clearly through the glare. And I watched him look down at his phone and smile. A slow, satisfied smile. That was the exact moment the truth hit me with chilling clarity. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated, planned. As I drove to my brother Dave's house with my entire life stuffed into trash bags in the back seat, one question slammed into my brain over and over like a heartbeat. How long had this 17-year-old been plotting to burn my marriage to the ground? And why? The first week at my brother's place felt like living underwater. I barely slept. Food tasted like dust. My mind wouldn't stop replaying every moment, every conversation, every strange shift in Luke's behavior. Dave kept pushing me to call Diana, to fight for her, to force her to hear the truth. But why? She'd already decided who I was. In her eyes, I was the villain in her son's tragic story. Still I called, and called, and called. Maybe 50 times in total. Every single one went straight to voicemail. I sent messages pleading for a chance to talk, to explain, to walk through things rationally. Nothing. By week 2, something inside me changed. The shock started to drain away, and something colder replaced it. I began piecing things together like a detective retracing old crime scenes. Luke's split-second expression on the stairs. His sudden bursts of emotion at perfect moments. The bruise showing up right after the car argument. Those whispered conversations that always ended when I entered the room. None of it was random. None of it was normal. And the realization made my skin crawl. If Luke had been weaving this story for months, I needed more than words to expose him. I needed proof. So I hired help. A family attorney named Patricia listened to everything while quietly jotting down notes. When I finished, she asked one question. "Do you own the house?" I told her yes. I'd bought it before the marriage. She nodded slowly. "That's good. It gives us leverage. But if you want to move forward, you need to do it fast." I admitted I wasn't sure about divorce yet, that some tiny part of me still hoped Diana would wake up. Patricia sighed gently. "In my experience, if someone is willing to believe the worst version of you without a shred of evidence, that person has already made their choice." Her words felt like a punch because they were true. Next, I hired Marcus, a private investigator who handled deception, fraud, and infidelity cases. I felt crazy even explaining it, a grown man describing how a teenager had outplayed him. But Marcus didn't laugh. He actually nodded. "You'd be surprised how manipulative kids can be when they want something. Let's start with finances. There's usually a money trail." He was right. It took him less than a week to uncover the first betrayal. Our joint account, the one used for household bills, had been bleeding money steadily for half a year. $8,000 gone. Little withdrawals and purchases, small enough that I hadn't noticed while buried under 60-hour workweeks. Gaming gear, designer clothes, electronics, food deliveries multiple times a day, all linked back to Luke. But the part that froze my blood? Diana had to know. Some of the transactions required parental approval. And Marcus found transfers, Diana pulling money from savings to cover Luke's overdrafts. She'd been hiding it from me, covering for him, protecting him even while our finances tanked. Then Marcus dug deeper. He discovered Diana had opened a credit card in her name alone, 2 months earlier. Maxed it out almost immediately, another $4,000 gone, nearly all on Luke. It wasn't just Luke manipulating her. Diana was actively participating in the deception. But the biggest blow was still coming. Marcus suggested checking Luke's digital footprints, deleted messages, private posts, old backups. All recoverable with the right tools. I hesitated, but I needed truth more than pride. What he uncovered made my stomach drop. Messages stretching back nearly a year. Mom's starting to doubt him. Just gotta push harder and the old man is out. Another. She always believes me when I cry. It's too easy. And the car conversation. My stepdad is such a cheap bastard. He won't get me what I deserve. But the one that tore everything wide open was from just 3 weeks ago, right before my entire world collapsed. Almost there. Got the bruise ready. Showing Mom tonight. This should be the final nail in the coffin. He planned it. He injured himself. He framed me deliberately. And then Marcus found it, a video file buried in Luke's cloud storage, probably saved by mistake. The video Marcus uncovered was almost too disturbing to watch. There was Luke, alone in his bathroom, lifting his forearm and smashing it against the edge of the counter. He flinched with every hit, jaw clenched, but he kept going, again and again, until a deep purple bruise started blooming beneath his skin. "This better work," he muttered under his breath, like this was just another step in some twisted checklist. I felt my stomach turn. I wasn't just watching a teenager act out, I was witnessing a kid intentionally injure himself to blow up my marriage. And all I could think was, what kind of mind does this? What had I ever done to deserve this kind of cold, strategic cruelty? But Marcus wasn't done. He pulled up another thread of messages, the final missing piece, conversations between Luke and his best friend. "Once they split, Mom's gonna wanna leave this dead town," one message read. "She'll sell the house and we can finally move to the city where something actually happens. And without him around, she'll have more money for me." It was all laid out in black and white. Luke didn't hate me. He didn't fear me. He wasn't reacting to anything I'd done. He wanted a new life, big city, new friends, excitement, and I was the immovable obstacle in his way. The house was mine legally. Diana couldn't sell it while we were married. But a divorce? A fresh start? That fit perfectly into his little master plan. By this point, I had everything. The The financial trail, the messages, the credit card statements, the bruise video, every piece of manipulation preserved on paper or on screen. Patricia, my attorney, reviewed the whole pile page by page. When she finished, she looked up and told me I had enough evidence for a divorce that would heavily favor me, no contest. But then she warned me gently that exposing Luke could permanently shatter my relationship with Diana. I almost laughed. What relationship? She'd kicked me out of my own home without a single conversation. She never even asked for my side. She'd chosen her son, or rather the fiction her son crafted, long before I knew what was happening. 3 weeks after she threw me out, I finally heard from her. A text. 4 lines that felt like a stranger had written them. Have you had time to think about your behavior? Luke says he's willing to give you another chance if you apologize to him and commit to doing better. We can discuss you coming home once you've reflected on what you've done. No concern for me. No curiosity about my side. Just a demand. That I apologize to the kid who had manufactured every piece of the nightmare. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying with only 4 words. Come over tomorrow. 3 p.m. She answered instantly. Does this mean you're ready to make things right? I didn't respond. Instead, I stayed up the entire night gathering every shred of evidence. Printing messages, highlighting bank statements, organizing timestamps. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be the end. Diana walked into the coffee shop exactly at 3 p.m. I watched her through the window as she stepped out of her car, thinner than before, dark circles under her eyes, makeup trying and failing to hide the exhaustion. For just a moment, a faint ache flickered in my chest. I had loved her deeply once. But then the memory of 3 weeks of silence, blame, and blind faith in her son washed that ache away. I picked this place deliberately. Neutral territory. Public enough to keep things controlled. A space where neither of us could twist the narrative or raise voices. She spotted me at a small corner table and walked over with a cautious smile, like she expected to find me broken and ready to beg. She sat across from me and immediately launched into a soft lecture. How she and Luke had been talking. How maybe therapy could help. How if I admitted my anger issues we might still fix things. I let her talk for half a minute. 30 seconds of excuses, assumptions, and fantasies. Then I raised my hand. She stopped. I slid a thick manila folder across the table toward her. She frowned, then looked from the folder to me, uncertainty settling in her eyes. I told her to open it. Her fingers trembled as she flipped it open. The divorce papers were on top, official, stamped, and already signed by my lawyer. Her face drained of color. We can work through this, she whispered, panicked. I kept my voice calm. Keep going. She turned the pages. The bank statements, the credit card charges, months of withdrawals tied to Luke, transfers she'd made to cover overdrafts he caused. Her lips parted like she wanted to explain, but I shut that down with a quiet, firm, next page. Then came the printed messages. Luke's conversations, the blueprint of the manipulation. His bragging about how easy it was to sway her. His plans to get the old man out. His excitement about finally moving to the city once I was gone. I watched the realization hit her like a slow, suffocating wave. Her hands shook. She kept shaking her head like if she denied it hard enough, the truth would bend. These could be fake, she whispered. I didn't answer. I simply pressed play on the video on my phone and turned the screen toward her, the sound low enough for her ears alone. The thud of Luke slamming his arm against the counter filled the space between us. His muttered, "This better work," echoed like a confession. Diana's entire expression collapsed. She covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide and wet. She kept mumbling that he'd cried, that he'd looked scared, that he'd told her I grabbed him. He played you, I said, voice cold. For months. He tore our marriage apart so you'd sell my house and move to the city with him. It's all right there. She broke. Quiet sobs shook her shoulders as she tried to hold herself together in the crowded shop. Then she looked at me with wounded eyes and asked the question that finally snapped something in my chest. Why didn't you make me see? I almost laughed from disbelief. I tried, I said. I begged you to talk. But you didn't want my side. You believed him without evidence. You kicked me out without a conversation. She reached for my hand and I pulled mine away. She choked out that she was just trying to protect her child. What was I supposed to do? She pleaded. You were supposed to be my wife, I said, my voice tight. 4 years together. You couldn't give me the benefit of the doubt? You couldn't ask for proof? One question? Anything? Silence settled like ash between us. The truth was undeniable now. She'd chosen Luke the minute he started whispering poison into her ear. I'd never stood a chance. And that's when the coffee shop door swung open hard enough to rattle the bell. Luke walked in. He must have been waiting outside this whole time, watching, listening, too impatient to stay in the car any longer. The second Luke burst through the coffee shop doors, it was like a storm had been unleashed inside a quiet room. He spotted us instantly. His eyes locked on the two of us sitting at that corner table, and he stomped toward us with all the righteous fury of a kid who thinks the world owes him everything. His face was beet red, jaw clenched, and he demanded to know what I was doing to his mother, as if I were the villain in all this. But the second his eyes landed on the papers spread across the table, something in him flickered. Not guilt, fear. Real, unmistakable fear. It lasted barely a heartbeat before he scrambled to cover it up, insisting loudly that I was lying and trying to turn his mom against him. The video. His video. The one of him in his bathroom, slamming his own arm into the counter over and over until a bruise bloomed. The color drained from his face. Then panic. Then rage, pure, unfiltered rage. He shot back with, "You went through my stuff. You had no right," loud enough that half the cafe turned to look. I kept my voice steady and told him, "You tried to frame me for abuse. I had every right." Diana was staring at her son like he had suddenly morphed into a stranger. Her voice trembled as she begged him, actually begged him, to tell her it wasn't real. And that's when the last remaining piece of Luke's mask snapped off. "So what if I did?" He spat, louder this time, defiantly, like he expected applause. You could feel the air shift. People stopped sipping their coffee. Heads turned. He went on, ranting about how his mother was miserable with me, how I was boring and cheap and not his dad. That they should have moved away from this dead town a year ago. Diana gasped like someone had punched the air out of her. But Luke didn't care. His voice kept climbing. He complained that all his friends had already moved to the city, and he was stuck here because of me. He said she deserved a real life, and once she divorced me and sold the house, everything could finally start. I leaned back and said quietly, "It's my house. Diana can't sell it." His face cracked into a deeper shade of furious red. He started rambling about lawsuits and some friend's mother who took half of everything in a divorce. And that was the exact moment when I watched Diana finally see him. Not as her son, not as the boy she'd been protecting, but as the person who had destroyed her marriage to get what he wanted. She whispered, voice barely holding together, that he'd torn our life apart for money and a move to the city. Luke tried to pivot, stuttering excuses, glancing around as he realized every eye in the cafe was on him. He said it wasn't like that. He said he just wanted them to be happy. But the damage was done. That was when I laid out the truth with calm, measured words that cut through all the noise. They had 30 days to move out. After that, the house was mine again. Diana's face collapsed. She begged, actually begged, for time to process everything, to try to repair what had been broken. But I had nothing left to give. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You believed I was a monster without a single question. Without a single shred of proof. You let him manipulate you for months, and you never once asked for my side. Even then, even with everything sitting right in front of her, she wanted another chance. But the sad truth was she had never given me a first one." She fell apart, sobbing into her hands while Luke stood beside her, arms crossed, still defiant, even as his whole plan lay in ruins at his feet. I stood, gathered my copy of the divorce paperwork, and told them again that they had 30 days. Diana reached for my arm. I stepped away, and I walked out. Behind me, her sobs mixed with Luke's angry voice as he probably tried to twist the story again. Through the window, I saw them, Diana crumbling in her chair, Luke gesturing wildly as if none of this was his fault, even though every piece of evidence sat right in front of them. A month later, my lawyer confirmed they had moved out. They'd found a cramped two-bedroom apartment across town, worlds away from the stability and comfort they had before. Patricia told me Diana had tried to fight for some kind of settlement, but she had nothing. The house was mine before the marriage, and she had been complicit, knowingly or not, in Luke stealing $8,000. Mutual friends told me Diana was shattered, barely functioning at work. Meanwhile, Luke was making her life a living hell, turning on her with the same manipulation, the same venom, the same ruthless blame she once helped him weaponize against me. Late at night, I'd sometimes drift back to the good moments, the ones from before his lies poisoned everything. For a brief second, I'd feel a sharp sting of sadness. But mostly, I felt something else entirely: relief. Because I finally understood a truth I should have seen long before the wreckage hit. You can't build a marriage when trust only flows in one direction. You can't love someone who's willing to abandon you the moment a lie is easier than honesty. Luke taught me that lesson in the cruelest, clearest way possible. And now, both he and Diana are forced to live inside the consequences of the choices they made, and the loyalty they gave to the wrong person. If this story struck a nerve, don't forget to subscribe to Dark Infidelity Stories for more raw, unapologetic tales of betrayal, truth, and the fallout that follows every broken vow. Like, share, and comment your thoughts. Your voice might help someone else avoid their own disaster.